Hi, my name is Tracy Chauvin. I'm going to be walking you through a case study called Get This Child Out of My Room, where a veteran teacher is frustrated by the special education system. What do I know? I know that we are at Schuyler K-12 Comprehensive School. It's part of the Fulton School District, which is actually a co-op made up of more than 16 school districts in a rural area. There is one superintendent in charge of this entire co-op, and he visits each school, each little district on a schedule. They have really tried to maximize their resources financially, so each school then has its own associate superintendent who is actually a full-time teacher who is doing this as an extra duty. We know that we have Susan Green, who is recently graduated from college. She's a first-year special education teacher, replacing Mrs. Lewis, who has been at Schuyler for 25 years. We know that we have Carl, who's in the 3rd grade in Mrs. Taylor's class. Mrs. Taylor is a 10-year veteran teacher. We know that Carl has an IEP for behavior. His parents are recently divorced within the last 90 days, and they're not highly involved. He has 2 older siblings who also receive support at the middle school, and they take medication. There was an IEP meeting the first week of school where there was a decision made by the team to continue with the reinforcement system and consequence system that was set into place by Mrs. Lewis previously. And we know that Carl has become physically and verbally aggressive towards himself and Mrs. Taylor recently. And historically, when they were behavior students, Mrs. Lewis, the previous special ed teacher, took the SPED students at teacher request and would put them in the detention room with a workbook. Miss Green is proposing a new plan where Carl can visit her when he's dysregulated and once regulated, rejoin his class. What do I need to know? Carl's thoughts on the new plan. Miss Green asked him about his thoughts in general, but did she tell him specifically, I would like to know what you would like in regard to this new plan. Do you feel comfortable doing this? Where would you like to go if it's not my room? So that you can really remove Carl from feeling blamed and shamed and instead get his thoughts on this plan, which isn't him and his emotions and why did you do this, but here's what we're doing. What are your thoughts? Also asking Carl who he feels connected to, really investigating that. Who does he have a relationship within the building with? Are there any community supports such as community mental health center? Mom mentioned that one of the siblings was taking medication, specifically Ritalin, and is there the possibility for Carl to be evaluated for medication as well, and is there the possibility that we can connect them with therapy? What skill teaching did Mrs. Lewis do in previous grades? When we think about an IEP and we think about a behavior intervention plan, we would like to know the preventative as well as the reaction plan. The reaction plan was taking them and putting them in a detention room. What was the prevention? What skill teaching was happening? How were they spending their special ed time together? What did last year look like in gen ed? What was that relationship like with that teacher? What were Carl's strengths and weaknesses? What were the teacher's strengths and weaknesses? How can we play off what was successful? What documentation has been done currently? It was mentioned that Ms. Green did a few observations, but in terms of sustained documentation done with fidelity, how do we know really the time, the days, the week, the dates, and the location? Is this happening across all environments or just with Miss Taylor in the gen ed setting? What accommodations are present in the general education setting? If we know what worked last year, maybe we can replicate those. Also, if we know that his threshold is lower, then maybe that window of tolerance, we know it's lower, so maybe we can shorten some of his assignments, add in more frequent breaks, know what accommodations are available and utilize them. And then what resources are available in the building? What does staffing look like specific to the special education department and the school in general? So what is the problem? There are 2 problems that I see here. We have, what is the appropriate placement for Carl considering the least restrictive environment? We know that Mrs. Taylor does not feel safe. We know that he's become aggressive towards her. So what's the most appropriate placement for Carl? And then how can we team together to provide the appropriate support and develop a plan for Carl? So my proposed plan of action is a 4-part plan, with the first part being a reevaluation. We would like to open a reevaluation and take those 60 school days to really do a thorough and intentional functional behavior assessment. And as part of that assessment, take some really intentional data, really digging deep into when this is occurring, where it is occurring, and what might be triggering this. Concurrent with that, we also want to be trying our new behavior intervention plan. not just the reaction plan of when he's dysregulated, he can go to a safe place in the building, but also a prevention plan of daily skill teaching, the reinforcement for that, but taking away the consequences so that we're reinforcing the generalization of skills. And then we also want to add in a few non-contingent. So for non-contingents, we want to look at behavior in general. We want to look at supports in general without looking at his behavior. Let's add in a check-in, check-out system that doesn't have to do with the reinforcement system, but it's him getting just a really good one-on-one with an adult, and we can decide which adult that is, preferably a male since his dad is so removed. And then also adding in frequent breaks, some for movement, some for regulation. So that would look like him going and being a helper in PE would be the movement breaks, and then him having regulation breaks would be him pausing, taking a moment to practice deep breathing, to go take a walk, to go get a drink, things that help regulate the brain. And then we would also want to add in some accommodations within the classroom, specifically environmental supports in terms of having a cool down spot identified in the classroom. If in the classroom isn't working, adding on a next layer of having a cool down pass so that he knows he can use that, and that really being communicated thoroughly. And then we also want to look at maybe reducing some of the workload and making that intentional. He can still show mastery of standards, but then taking some of that away, since we know that his window of tolerance is a little bit smaller right now. And then also we want to connect family with community resources. I really want to make sure that Carl's having some thoughtful, intentional time to talk about his feelings, process through what's going on, and really figure out some really, really good coping skills and processing through what's triggering him. Communication protocol and regular team meetings. It sounds as if Ms. Taylor's frustration has turned her into a slightly unprofessional communicator. So really looking at how we can get that need met for her, where she, instead of really coming in and tattling about how everything is going, can communicate and have a daily log for parents and teachers alike of here's sort of 3 stars and a wish. Here's 3 things that went well for him today. Here's something that he can improve upon for tomorrow. And having Carl be a part of that communication as well, so that he really feels invested and has some buy-in. And so parents are seeing some of his success, and when they start to see the success of these are going well, he did good during this 15 minutes of reading time. He did good when he was a helper for the PE teacher. They can really start to build upon that to have that investment and buy-in into Carl and into his plan. And then also having staff training on trauma responsive practices, looking into not just we're doing this, but why we're doing this, how trauma and how this kind of toxic stress affects the brain, and then having some really deep discussion on what we can do to support and create a culture of safety and create a culture of caring, create a culture that is just responsive so that everyone gets their needs met, not just the students, not just the families, but also the staff, adding in that we want everybody to be safe and secure here. So having staff training regarding trauma responsive practices. So what is best for students? Following the law, ensuring that we have truly done that full reevaluation process, that full functional behavior assessment, and the pre-teaching, the prevention piece, as well as the response piece for Carl's IEP plan. So following the law is in the best interest of the student, making sure that we're not putting Carl in the most restrictive environment for our own comfort. Developing a culture of trust, safety, and connectedness is in the best interest of our entire community, the students, the staff, the families, and creating that infrastructure of support. If we can look at how we can utilize our staffing and put a para in there with Ms. Taylor during the most difficult times based on what that functional behavior assessment says for us, then we're able to create this sort of network of support for all within the building. Reflection. I am thinking that this is a learning moment for all, that it is a paradigm shift and a different way of thinking about inclusive practices. So this is a little bit hard. Ms. Green brings a lot to the team when it comes to that. And how can we create a responsive community for all with the resources we have? I am valuing our students, the relationships that we're building, and then the community that we're also building. And I'm feeling empathy for all in this because I understand that it is extremely frustrating and scary to have a student become aggressive. I know that it is frustrating and scary for Carl to be going through all that. I'm feeling hope and optimism that we can put a plan in place so that Carl does succeed here at school where he does feel connected. I'm feeling appreciative for everybody going out of their comfort zone and trying. Future implications. There are some unanswered questions. How can we build a new culture in the building? So not just for this one student, but for everybody. What type of leadership is there to support this paradigm shift? It sounds as if there is not an identified formal leader, but a lead teacher, and this is an extra duty for her. So what type of leadership is there formally? A building leadership team, anything like that? And can Carl's parents sustain outside resources and support? Do they want to? So looking at Standard 2, where educational leaders promote the academic success and personal well-being of every student by enhancing instructional capacity, there are 3 components we're going to look at. The first one is academic success. This plan has promoted academic success by increasing positive interaction with teachers, which leads to higher quality relationships and increased student engagement. In academic success, we're following the laws. We're ensuring that everyone's needs are met. We're ensuring that Carl's getting his free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment, and that we are putting plans in place for him so that he can engage and he can access that general education environment so that he can be around his peers, because there doesn't seem to be academic concerns. This is all behavioral. Student well-being. We've put an intentional plan to communicate between parents, teachers, and school. So this will increase his connectedness. This will increase everyone's ability to form relationships, which increase that self-efficacy for Carl. Once he starts to see himself succeeding, once that's celebrated, he'll feel better. Thus, hopefully, the aggression will decrease. We've also developed a plan that supports the whole child in order to increase physical and emotional safety of all within that community. It all ties together. We are putting an intentional plan in place to prevent and respond if needed. And so the thought being that we have taken into account that if Carl has all of his needs met, his regulation needs, his relationship needs, his responsibility needs, then he is able to really start to pull himself together to stay regulated throughout the day. The instructional capacity. We're involving all the teachers and increasing their investment in the building a culture of trust, safety, and connectedness with families and staff. So as we've asked Ms. Green, as we've asked Ms. Taylor to give their opinions, their thoughts, as we've asked the PE teacher and the paraprofessional who's supporting the classroom to really buy into this plan, we're creating a new culture inherently by doing that. And through training, we're building teachers' capacity to recognize and respond to behaviors in a trauma-responsive manner, which increases engagement and increases the time spent in learning. It also just increases job satisfaction and staff well-being. Increased staffing allows for more collaborative teaching methods. So in addition, we talked about having a para there as the functional behavior assessment told us what time of days, what areas were the most needed. So we were going to put a paraprofessional in there to support Carl. We now have the ability to co-teach in a variety of manners. So it's not just someone sitting next to Carl, but we can use them to really aid and support instruction, which benefits everybody within that general education environment. Thank you for walking through the case study for EDL 853 Special Education Law with me.